Good evening to everyone. On behalf of the President of the Museum of Science, Yanis Mielis, as well as our Board of Trustees and Overseers, I'd welcome you to tonight's event. My name is Cheng Pham, and I'm the chair of the Fundraising Events Committee and a longtime overseer here at the museum. I want to thank everyone for joining us for tonight's program, and we'll hear from four remarkable guests and Mount Everest experts who will share with us their own personal stories and insights. But first, I would like to extend a big thank you to Professor Peter Hansen for moderating tonight's panel discussion, and to our three panelists, Thom Pollard, Dr. Heather Macdonald, and Lhakpa Sherpa. Thank you all for taking time to be with us for what I'm sure will be a wonderful conversation. Now, many of you may be aware of the roots that the museum has in exploration, as our founding director, Brad Washburn, was very passionate about both mountaineering and mapping his journeys. And in the spirit of sharing tales of adventure, after tonight's event, we would like to invite you to join us for our 12th annual Washburn Challenge, which will take place on Sunday, July 8th. Now, while the Washburn Challenge may not quite be an expedition to the top of Mount Everest, we are excited, however, to share with you the museum's very own endurance event. And here to talk more about the Washburn Challenge is the event founder, Mike Thonis. Mike?
Thank you, Ching. Thank you, everybody, for coming. This is a great crowd. Thank you. I think what everybody here has in common is, well, we're all mountaineers. I think everybody here is a mountaineer. Even if you don't think you are, just by being here. Before I introduce tonight's panel discussion, which actually Ching did, I want to tell you about what we think is an important event that's this summer. It's been for the last dozen summers, that I think is adventurous, fun, and philanthropic. For the 12th year in a row, the museum will host the Washburn Challenge on Mount Washington. It's going to be on Sunday, July 8, which you might wonder, what? Why July 8? You know, it turns out on average to be the warmest day of the year. And so we picked that day on purpose because we want everybody to be safe. Basically, small groups of us will hike up and down the mountain, and in some cases hike up and down twice in one day. But you get to decide. No one's going to make you do it one way or the other. It is not a contest. It is not a race. It's just for fun, and it's a fundraiser for the museum, for this museum. 12 years ago, I became a trustee, but wanted to do more to support this great place. I also wanted to honor my dad, who as a 9-year-old orphan, he was an orphan here in Boston, South Boston, he would sneak out and visit the museum. I used to ask him about that, like, why would you know, what were the other kids doing? He thought it was completely normal that he'd come over here. So I thought of something ambitious and fun, and to prove that I really, really cared about this place. So I hiked up and down Mount Washington twice in one day that first year, by myself, although on the second way back, my son joined me, and Eric Workman, one of our photographers, joined me. Thank you, Eric. In the following year, more people joined us. And then last year, we had, I think, maybe 8 double climbers, something like that, and a very large number of single hikers. So it was really a lot. Last year was just great. It was so much fun, so many people. Now, if you are a new hiker, or maybe just a little worried about Mount Washington, and I know some of you are secretly nervous about Mount Washington or have never done it, we've got AMC guides, Appalachian Mountain Club guides, who will help you to the summit. We got some of those here. Hey! And I assure you, you'll never get left behind. Okay, if you want to take a nice slow pace, there will be a AMC guide that will stay with you happily. Because really it's about just smelling the flowers and enjoying the place. On the other hand, if you are a more comfortable hiker, there will be an AMC guide who will keep up with you. You know, the whole thing's very organic. You just, you know, it kind of splits up as you take off. Some people go a little fast, a little slower. It is not a contest. It is not a race. If you are experienced at hiking, you can even do a double, which really is easier than it sounds. I mean, I'm doing one this year. I'm 68 years old, and I don't think it's that hard. I like to make it sound hard for fundraising, but you do need, if you do the double, you do need to let us know ahead of time. You can also bring your family with you, and we will have separate programming for them this year. And when the day is done, we will all celebrate at the Mount Washington Hotel with a buffet dinner. Most importantly, you get to raise money for this great science, technology, and math museum. And it's easy to raise money. Raising money around the climb is easy. Don't be intimidated by that. People will donate because it's to this great museum. If you want to know more, get more, you can ask me later, or you can fill out this postcard. I think, was there one on every seat? All right, good. So now or you can go to the World Wide Web, also known as www, and I thought that stood for something else. And you go, and actually it's www.mos.org/challenge. But to tell you the truth, all you have to do is put in Museum of Science Challenge or Museum of Science Climb. It's like the first thing that pops up. It's that famous. Okay, so now for tonight's program, I want to introduce our moderator, Professor Peter Hansen. Dr. Hansen, he's the one here closest to me. Oh, don't clap yet. You haven't heard anything about him. Wait till you hear what... Dr. Hansen is Professor of History and Director of International and Global Studies at WPI right here in Worcester. He is author of The Summits of Modern Man, Mountaineering After the Enlightenment. Everybody knows these talk show hosts, they have guests, and they always pretend they've seen the movie. You know? I have to admit, I have not read this book, but I read an awesome review about it. I think you know that review, don't you? Sure. Yeah, I read this awesome, it's a great review. I highly recommend the review, but read the book. I wasn't given enough time. Ask my lovely wife, who told me I could not mention her name, but Susie, and she'll tell you that it's on my wish list for Father's Day. Okay, so I will read it. And so the book is about what it examines is the morphing of summits and what they mean in culture. You know, if you think about it, remember reading in school about how the king or the god lived up on the mountain, or the gods were up in the mountains. But that's really morphed so that now we think about, well, who ascended a mountain first? And even maybe that's morphed, so that's now let's just be somebody who's gotten up on a mountain so we can claim we did it. And so the role, and I'm doing a poor job of this, I'm sure, but this is generally speaking what I believe the book is about. I need to read it, obviously. He is now researching and writing another book on the commercialization of Mount Everest, which I think is very relevant to tonight's discussion. So please welcome Professor Hansen.
You've heard about me. I just want to give you a little context for this discussion, and then I'll have each of the panelists introduce themselves and what some of their experience has been about Mount Everest. So this Tales for the Top is a dialogue about Mount Everest in recent years. After a fatal storm on Mount Everest in 1996, which was recounted in many books and films and commentary, led to kind of a controversy about commercialization. Commercialization, it was said, caused the tragedy in 1996 and led to the downfall of mountaineering after a golden age that had preceded it. The crowds of fee-paying tourists had replaced the real mountaineers who used to go up climbing on unclimbed routes, and the peak had been degraded. Now, from my perspective as a historian, this is a process of commercialization that's gone on for a much longer period of time and has taken a wide variety of forms. And although we won't be talking about it that much in today, if you look back over this longer perspective, from the naming and mapping of the peak through to the early expeditions, these were part of its commercialization. In many respects, the first commercial expedition to Mount Everest was in the 1920s, the one in which George Mallory disappeared, not one of the expeditions in the 1990s, which is when his body was found on the mountain. So these earlier forms of commercialization, though, have been obscured by the kind of nationalism and empire and the Cold War. It's only in this more recent period of globalization that mountaineering on Mount Everest has become a kind of a metaphor for other kinds of debates. And so exploring how these issues have manifested themselves from the perspective of people who've spent a good deal of time on the mountain is our charge today. And I'm hoping that you'll bear with us. We'll have a variety of discussion just among our panel, and then about 8:30, we'll have an opportunity for people in the audience to ask questions. Someone will be going around with a microphone. So if you have questions and we don't get to them, we will, I hope, have a chance to do that at your direction. So the purpose of this panel is to bring together a variety of perspectives. Oftentimes, these kind of discussions look like just a bunch of middle-aged white men, people like myself or Tom talking. We've tried, and we've succeeded, I think, in bringing a very diverse panel to bring this wider set of perspectives, because commercialization looks different if you look at it from multiple perspectives as well. So I want to thank Rachel McMaster and the museum staff for organizing this event and pulling us all together. And with that, I will just have us. The mic is cut. There we are. We know who you are. And when you first, when you first went to Everest, and something a bit about your experience, or the context that you're bringing to the discussion. Lhakpa, would you like to go first?
Yes, of course. I want to stand it. Namaste, everybody. My name is Lhakpa. Yes, I am studying Everest, small hiking in 15 years old in Himalayas. I'm come from Makalu regions, beautiful mountains around me. And my mom's born is 7 daughters and 4 brothers. My both 4 brothers guided the mountains, Everest. Yeah. I also summit in the Everest, yes. I'm very confused.
My name is Heather Macdonald, and I was a high-altitude mountain guide from 1990 until 2003. I started my career on Mount Rainier, just outside of Seattle, guiding people to the summit of Mount Rainier and leading different mountaineering seminars. And during that time, I worked for Rainier Mountaineering. And not long after that, I started working for an international company called International Mountain Guides, and guided on different peaks all around the world. And I went to Everest 2 times. Both times were from the north side. The first expedition was in 1994, and my second expedition was in 1998, so it's been a while. I did not summit Mount Everest. I got close in 1998 and reached 28,000 feet. I was with another guide as well as a client, and we turned back due to bad weather. And shortly after that, my life really started to change directions. And the year, in 1999, I lived in Kathmandu, Nepal, and worked for the famous mountaineering historian Elizabeth Hawley. And so that added a whole different dimension to my mountaineering experience.
My name is Thom Pollard, and I first went to Nepal in 1993 on a trek and a guide to guide a small peak near the Annapurna region called Tent Peak Tharpuchuli, and trekked in there as an itinerant guide. And I say that meaning I was really there being paid to go and not make any money, but all expenses were paid. And my goal in mind was to create a short film so I could help launch a film career. And I returned to Nepal a couple of years later to supposedly do a film about the Sherpa and the culture of the Khumbu region. And interestingly enough, none of those films really ever got completed. But at the same time, I was able to further my ambition, and that was to be a high-altitude mountaineer. In 1996, during the storm that Peter had referred to when the tragedy took place on Mount Everest, I was coincidentally on a mountain called Gasherbrum II in the Karakoram of Pakistan, caught in the same storm ultimately, but some 1,000 miles away, and had the epic of my lifetime, and really cut my teeth up there filming and always trying to do what I could to bring back that footage. And so I continued to pursue that career as a filmmaker, and interestingly enough, we're here to talk about the commercialization of Mount Everest. And as a person who loves that idea of being someone to enter an area that is pristine and never touched before, I benefited very much from that commercialization because I was a cameraman, film producer, being paid to go on these trips to these mountains and bring these images and film footage back to the world to get you guys to want to go there and do the same thing. So I was part of the wheel. I was chugging the wheel. My first trip to Everest came in 1999 on the north side. I met Heather there. She was guiding a trek to base camp. I filmed the high-altitude camera work for a PBS BBC co-documentary about George Mallory and Sandy Irvine. It was the expedition that we discovered the body of George Mallory. I returned to Everest many years later, although it was deep on my wish list in 2014 to do another film. That year, there was a huge Serac avalanche that took the lives of 16, mostly Sherpa. That year, the mountain was closed. I returned in 2016, finally got my shot at the summit on another film, summited May 22nd, 2016. So I have a deep love of the people and culture of that area, and I'm truly affected and motivated by not letting the commercialization of that area have a tragic or negative effect, although I've witnessed it on the grandest of scales, on the positive and the negative side. So hopefully I can contribute something tonight to this discussion with these esteemed guests and moderator. So thank you very much.
So, Lhakpa, you were very modest in your own introduction. Perhaps you could just say how many times you've been to Everest and tell us a little more about those experiences.
I'm just a little shy, but I've been 8 times Everest. Yeah. I have a south side, and in north side, in both side, I summit. I have a both side experience because I like some different kind of road, terrain. I want to challenge myself more limit. And yes, I did.
So at 8 times to the summit of Everest, this is more times than any other woman has been to the top of Everest.
Also, I have 3 children too. So
Yeah, there you go.
too busy.
Yeah.
Life is too busy.
How
Very
old,
busy lives.
Yeah.
how old are your children?
My son is almost 20. He's a soldier in the Navy right now. My daughter is 15 years old. She's in 9th grade. And the little one is 5th grade. It's very nice. I'm as a mother, too. I love children.
Okay. Well, there are more women now climbing Mount Everest, yourself included. And I wonder, has commercialization opened up more opportunities for women as climbers and as guides? What do you think? Heather, you want to take a start at that?
Sure. I think commercialization has definitely opened up more opportunity for women as climbers and for women as guides. I think early on in the mountaineering era, men wanted mountaineering as their own sport. And much in the same way that the Scotch and cigar room was male territory, I think men wanted the territory of the mountains and mountaineering to themselves. But I also think that once it became more culturally acceptable for women to join these big expeditions to the Himalaya, while women were included, there was still this perception that because women had less experience, they were less competent. And that logic didn't always hold up, but that was the perception. So if you were on an expedition and you didn't have a lot of experience, you were assumed to be less competent. And I found that with the guides that I worked with in the Himalaya, I never felt that point of view very severely from them, but I still made it a point to do twice as much. So if there was a pile of gear that needed to be carried to the higher to the higher camps, and there was a fellow guide who said, "Well, I'm going to take this rope," and then I would immediately say, "Well, I'm going to take two," just to be sure that my competence wasn't questioned. And the other thing that I made sure of, especially in 1994, is that with my climbing partner at the time, we went ahead and fixed ropes up to the North Col, which is the first major saddle on that route. Instead of having a team of Sherpas go ahead and fix the ropes, we went ahead and fixed ropes because, again, I wanted to assure my competence and my right to be on that expedition. So,
cool. Were there any earlier female guides before you as kind of role models or someone who had blazed a path?
No, not at all. And in fact, I mean, my first Himalayan expedition was to a peak called Shishapangma in Tibet. And that was in 1993. I was 22 years old at the time. And from that time, 1993, all the way towards the end of my career in 1998, I never ran into another female guide in the Himalaya. So I was usually the only female. And it was a ratio I didn't always mind, I have to admit. But especially being a young 20-year-old, but and as I said, from my immediate fellow guides, I was really encouraged and accepted. Especially my bosses, Eric Simonson and Phil Urschler and George Dunn, were incredibly encouraging. Sometimes it was the clients that were on these expeditions that I had to sort of convince that, yes, I was a guide and a full-fledged, competent guide. Yeah?
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. Now, many times some people suggest that there's fewer women climbing because they may be parents, as Lhakpa is, and that the women who climb can be criticized for climbing and leaving their children behind. A criticism that doesn't get made of some of their other male guides who are alongside them. Mm-hmm. What is your view on that? Tom, do you have a perspective on this?
One who gets away scot-free. I mean, I get to go away and come back to a house that's all cleaned and the kids have been taken care of and the stitches have been mended and everything. Well, it's a great question because the truth is that I've found, well, there's a lot of competent guides out there. There's tons of them, and I would say more so now than ever because it's kind of an industry of sorts. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But the women guides for sure, they're probably more competent, at least going back in time. They work harder, and I hate to say it, there's more to prove to a certain extent. Sure. I think a lot of those biases, sure. they remain. However, you know, in terms of the guys, the men and the guides who are men, you find a proportionate number of them are either not married, never have been married, don't have kids, or have kids and are divorced. there's not a lot of, it doesn't work real well. If you pursue that life, you'll see either a career will go a certain number of years and that person will get out of the guiding world in order to preserve their home life, or they'll veer off and divorce or never get into that relationship in order to pursue their climbing love, if you will. I'm no longer married, but my wife at the time always used to say to me, "You've been having an affair for all these years, and it's with the mountains." And it was very appropriate and right on. And I was fortunate to have the ability to maintain that relationship long enough to have 2 children and still be very close, but it didn't work. You give, I mean, you know, it's everybody gives up things in order to become the person that they want to become. But there becomes, at least Mount Everest to me, became to an extent somewhat of an obsession for me. And I pursued it even when I knew it was going to create some havoc or destructive side effects at what I was leaving behind. You know, so the first time I went to Mount Everest in 1999, my son Will, who's now 20, he was about 15 months old when I left. And when I came back 2 to 3 months later, he was about 18 months, and he forgot who I was. I mean, that was pretty hardcore. And so would it be any surprise to me that my wife at the time had some level of unhappiness about that time away because I come back, I'm the hero. Everybody wants to talk to the guy who's been to Mount Everest with the discovery of George Mallory, this film production. I'm the man, and somebody's home taking care of the kids the whole time. So I may have just hit a little tangent there. However, what I'm saying, I love my kids. All right, I only have 2. I you know, and 1 summit. But you know, what's happened is I think this is the root, the crux of the biscuit for me is, in many respects, is that Mount Everest, the mountains, gave me this opportunity to truly investigate what it was and is that drives me, that keeps the wheels turning. And if I create certain relationships or alliances that ultimately are left into the leeway in order for me to continue the pursuit of those things that I love the most, then it's okay. As long as the maintenance of those relationships aren't purposefully harming another person. If it comes truly from the soul of who we are in that pursuit, then we're doing the right thing. There's no harm intended. So Everest has offered me that opportunity to see something back in 1993 on my first trip with my, not at the time, wife, and see a very pure, raw, unfiltered kind of Annapurna region and watch it change over the years. And to myself, I think I've grown and changed negatively and positively along with it. And as I watch it, I realize it's a very personal journey. I'm not sure if that added anything, but yeah. I don't know if that rings true. But
yeah, it does ring true.
There are no tangents.
Oh, then you've talked to the right guy right here. You want a tangent? Yeah, right.
But Lhakpa, you mentioned in your kind of introduction that you were a mother and a climber. And do you see any conflict between these roles, or how have you been able to deal with being both?
Yes, little difficult for me as a mother. I live with my 2 children in home. And my daughter say, "Mama, why you go again?" You know, so I want to do it because this is my sport. I need to go hike. "Mama, you come back, permis?" You know, they give a pink shirt, and I say, "Yes, I come back because I love you, girls. You stay nice with the here, just thinking about me. You know, I will, Mama, but be careful. You know, we are a Sherpa. We carry the load and put them in the tent. We guide up in the mountain. You know." We not die because people, you know, we are be careful. I tell like my daughter, and they believe me. They believe me, Mama, you submit in 8 times. I know you are experienced, you know. I know you know die. And I say, look at Shiny, and my daughter named Sunny. Look at you, very good with your iPad in the phone, right? I'm like that in the mountain, very good, don't worry. I say, you tossed me your phone, I tossed the mountain, you know. It's okay, you are very experienced in your phone. They said, I am very experienced in mountains, and I'm not dying, I'll come back, I promise. I tell like that. Yeah.
Did they have any interest in being on the mountains?
No, they're very interested no mountains, but they interested very. My both girl is very good doing sport, ski, gymnastic. They're very good the different kind of choice them here because they both in the United States, you know, little different kind of lawns. Now we don't love the cold. We love the one to go Daytona. We love the one to go Kiwi. They likes like that. They don't like the mountains. Yes.
Mm-hmm. You have brothers or sisters who have climbed Everest with you.
My both brothers is 4 brothers guys. Some brothers 5 times summit Everest, and he get them visa in United States. He never want to go back. And I said, why? You don't want to go back? No, I don't want to go back Everest. I want to have a comfortable life here. Yeah. It's okay. So, you know, yeah. He's going to come here. He will love and stay here. He said, no, I don't want to carry the load in my bag in 20 bottle oxygen in 8,000 meters and door up there. So here it's easy. I make some money. It's okay. It's good. You know, I really don't want to push too because all the Sherpa very work hard in carry heavy load in digging the 7,000 meters the ice. You know. Make it set up the tourists in a sleep can there, you know, put the sleeping bag, you know, put them tent, put the oxygen, you know, sometimes put them the down jugger, everything. You know, he said he don't want it like that life. He said, I want to stay here, you know, working $10 an hour, fine for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But you've been to the top 8 times, and I've read that you want to go to summit Everest 10 times. Is that right?
Yes, I really like some because I feel I go up in my mom's house and just I go up in my eyes just want to see in the mountains first. I never know see toys. I never know see computer. I never know see television in my life. I see this mountain, my eye open. I see this big mountain put on me, and I said I love it. You know I love this mountain. Why I give up? You know, I want to keep going. And after I'm divorced, I feel I'm go down. You know, so under the sea, you know, door up the Kumbu. I scold myself. And I said, I want to swing by in Everest again. And I want to go up and top. You know, I feel go down. You know, I tried again and again. I earthquake, I fell. I said, oh my God, I know summit, but so many. Kathmandu has a lot of people die in Everest base camp, you know. I came back, no summit, and come back home and give my children a big hug. You know, it's good. And I tried again, you know. I said, I want to go again. I never no give up. You know, I told my daughters, never no give up, Mama. Never no give up. I can't, never no say I can't. You can't. You learned. I told like that. And I tried again, and I want to feel myself. Mountain Everest is my doctors, you know, makes feel better for me. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do either of you, Tom or Heather, see the mountains in that same kind of way, kind of as your doctor or as therapy? Tell me more.
Yeah. I in 1989, when I first started climbing, I lived in a cave in Joshua Tree National Park in California. And for those of you who know the park, there's a cave, or there was, at the end of the Hidden Valley Loop. And I lived there for a few months with a group of climbers, mostly male. And we spent our days exploring the rocks, climbing in the sun, and at night we would eat under the stars and sit by the campfire. And from that experience, I had an intense desire to explore extreme wilderness. and beauty. And I think Tom's alluded to it, and Lhakpa. There is some kind of freedom that you touch when you are in that deep wilderness. And it's a freedom you don't have anywhere else. You have to be, you're almost shattered by it. You're broken open by that experience of wilderness, and which is why you want to go back, why you have the mountains in your eyes.
Yeah.
You come back home, and it feels like it's this warm orb that you're carrying with you, that experience of vastness. So it's Mount Everest, or climbing to those extremes in that kind of wilderness is kind of doctor. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, there's no doubt that there's something that can be soothed when going into those places that are so hard to reach. And something about being on the mountain is really transformative. And on another end, I think what happens is there's these relationships that develop in the successes, and primarily actually in the failures, that we can't really replicate here, kind of commuting to work or whatever, maybe when there's an accident or some event that's, kind of outside the norm. And part of when I look at the mountains, I see that camaraderie, those friendships, those relationships that just are forever. You've been in the trenches. And, as a little kid, I used to play, Army games, and I'm 56 now, and I grew up, kind of during the Vietnam War, and I would play games that were about the Vietnam War. And I was really intrigued by that. And it's interesting to me that I never pursued a career in the military, but I think what happened was when I went to the mountains, it was like I was able to kind of create some experience, that intensity, and manufacture like some kind of hero type event that it could never match what happens in the military or in battle or protecting our country. But it was like something, like I could go there and just walk in and have these extreme experiences. And I can tell you about descending in that storm in 1996 from 25,500 feet down this avalanche slope, and just thinking every step of an 8 to 10 hour slog down a perfect avalanche slope in 4 feet of fresh snow, thinking, I'm dead, I'm dead, I'm dead. We're all gonna die, we're all gonna die, we're all gonna, every second just thinking, this is it. If we get out of this, man, we just cheated death. And, so that, in a way, I don't like those experiences really anymore. I just wanted to say that. I kind of liked them back then, but there's something that would draw you in because you're right there. Yeah. And you're with a good guide and a talented person, and you build a team around you that you trust. When they look you in the eyes and say, you need to turn around because you're too tired or you're hypoxic or something's going on, you trust that teamwork. So the mountain, this thing, the abode of gods, if you will, and then this camaraderie, these partnerships. So it's kind of twofold for me.
Are those kind of connections to other people and to the mountain, a lot of people have referred to for a long time. Are those in any way diminished in this recent years through this period that people call the commercialization on Everest? Is there something about being with guides or being with other people that changes things? Or can you still get those kinds of experiences that each of you have mentioned?
Do you want to? Yeah, please. Okay. No, I think you can still get those kinds of experiences. Mm-hmm. And what Tom is describing, I feel the same way. last summer, I was heading back out to Seattle, and I wanted to reconnect with some people that I used to climb with, and I sent one climber an email, and he sent an email right back, and he said, "Coffee pot is on, door is open." And I hadn't spoken to him in 10 years. So the brotherhood of the rope or the sisterhood of the rope runs very deep. And I don't think at its depth, those relationships at depth have not been disturbed. The surface might look different with commercialization when you've got guide and client relationship. Sometimes that can be a different relationship, depending on the context and the situation. But I think at depth, there is the climbing community, the bonds are deep and they are sacred. And I think I climbed in some ways for as long as I did because I was held in kind of this paternal tribe. I mean, I could call on 20 different guys who had my back at any time. And that is a very powerful force, very powerful feeling.
Cool.
Lhakpa,
Yes?
do you have any thoughts about that?
I have no idea. I have no idea. I have no idea.
No? Okay. Tom?
Well, there's no doubt that with the growth in popularity, specifically Mount Everest, that the crowds has changed the game a lot. And while that growth has benefited many greatly, you know, a lot of the families in Nepal, the Sherpa and the Khumbu region, have benefited from excellent pay. There's also a huge downside. There's, you know, I think I'll say Westerner, but I'd say as the, you know, kind of a white Western guy who goes there working as a film person, a cameraman, we put a lot of kind of trust and faith in that because we can plunk down some money for strong men and women to carry our loads, that sometimes we forget the downside of that. And in 2014, a mile away from my base camp tent, an avalanche fell, a serac fell off the west shoulder of Everest and took the lives of 16 men, most of them Sherpa. And it showed just how far that we've gone to kind of choke that mountain. Now I'm a guy who believes strongly in saying that commercialization isn't necessarily bad, but there's some regulations that need to be put into place. There's a lot of people who go to climb Mount Everest with very little experience. And without going too far down this road, because I don't really, because it's probably because it's hard to talk about, but the commercialization of Everest just absolutely slapped me in the face in 2016 on my own summit day, when I went up and summited very early in the morning, and on my way down I encountered 3 men in various stages of death, if you will, and they ultimately died. There was a New York Times cover, a big special section about them recently. I was quoted in it, and it didn't really make me look very good necessarily, which nothing untrue is printed about me. However, those people who passed away, in essence, were kind of victims of commercialization. They're very inexperienced, doesn't mean they don't have the rights to be there. Just because I climb doesn't mean I have more of a right than them. But they're from the Asian continent, had different kind of incomes, and in order to make their pennies stretch, they hired an outfit that supplied them with inexperienced climbing guides who didn't understand what going past the turnaround time meant. So if somebody at 27,000 feet is going up, and you know that they've got 5 more hours to go, and they've only got this much oxygen left, and they're tired, and it looks like they're about to die, you turn around. And if they say, no, I'm not turning around, you yank your rope and you pull them down. I mean, and the inexperience of these guides, and it's not even to say that those men who guided them were bad, but because of that inexperience and the commercialization of Everest, those 3 men died that day. That shouldn't have happened. And then down in base camp, there's this huge film production putting a TV series on, trying to like ambulance chase. Every time somebody had like frost nip on their finger, there was a helicopter evacuation, and this guy pretending he was a big doctor, and you know, it was nauseating. However, and nauseating as it was, I go inside, I close my tent, I start writing in my journal. I think, I'm no different. I've been making my living off of going to the mountains and filming documentaries. I've capitalized just as much as anybody else off that mountain. I've never paid. I've always made money doing it. So, so I see the downside of the commercialization. Hopefully, I think that ultimately people go in there consciously and understand that we can do positive things to the people, bring education to the Khumbu region, help the people, help give options. You don't just have to be a climbing guide in order to make a good living. You don't have to go risk your life in ferry loads up to Camp 2 on and off every day and, you know, 10 times every season and risk your life just to make a good living. There's other ways to do it. And heaven only knows. That's why a lot of the Sherpa culture has left the Khumbu and stayed in Kathmandu to make money there, come to the United States. It's good. Lhakpa's brother. It's a good place to make a living.
They're going inside here, they never know go back again.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a level of experience that a climber should be able to demonstrate before they're put on a climbing permit for Mount Everest?
Okay. Are you sure?
Sure, sure. You know. You don't.
Wow.
Sure, sure.
Yeah. So in 1993, back to that first expedition, Himalayan expedition that I was on to Shishapangma, it was led by Eric Simonson. And I'll never forget this conversation. We were having a rest day at base camp, and we were in the tent, and suddenly this idea of commercialization started to dawn on me, because we had a whole group of clients with us to that Shishapangma expedition. Not many commercial expeditions were running in 1993. It wasn't until the 1996 tragedy that things really started to take off, because to be honest, you can't buy better advertising. I mean, Krakauer's Into Thin Air was the best marketing for the commercialization of Mount Everest there could have ever been. So in 1993, there weren't a whole lot of commercial trips, and I looked at Eric, we were having a cup of coffee, and I said, so what's your plan for this? Are you gonna keep going? And he said, I am. And I call this the democratization of the Himalaya. So I want to make it open and available to people who've had dreams of visiting the Himalaya, climbing in the Himalaya, who want to be able to do that. And at the time, I thought, well, that's a really noble idea, this idea of freedom of the hills, right, where it should be open, where people will learn to value the mountains, value the wilderness by going to them. But as Tom was just describing, there's an underbelly to that. There's a real dark side. And I think Eric had to figure out early on who we would allow on expeditions and who we wouldn't. There were actually several clients on that 93 Shishapangma expedition who were on the 96 climbs as well. And without getting into names, I'm not so sure I would have taken the clients from Shishapangma to Everest after having worked with them on Shishapangma. So there is a real, there's a real underbelly. And like you, Tom, I was in the same storm in 1996, but I was at high camp on Cho Oyu, which is a peak about 50 miles as the crow flies from Mount Everest. And we luckily were not struggling for our lives at that time, but it was a fierce storm, and we delayed our summit bid. So, but commercialization is, it's going to be an ongoing issue, and whether the Nepalese government, Chinese government decides to regulate, get their hand, kind of like the way we do with the national parks here, is going to be, I think, a huge issue and a huge discussion.
Yeah, but it's not going to happen, unfortunately, because without going into how governments are organized necessarily.
Right.
So Nepal is going to be like, we'll take $12,000 per person, and if we get 1,000 of them, that's a lot of money. But if we limit it to 100, we don't make that much money. So that's part of the problem. So it's kind of a governmental thing. What is really good is that they're instituting ways to protect the guides, hopefully, and the icefall doctors, if you will, who set the ropes up through the Khumbu icefall and up to the summit. But yeah, a lot of that commercialization, it does have that underbelly. But then you look at it like, who has the right to set those stringent guidelines? It's very hard to say. For those of you who aren't aware, so Shishapangma is an 8,000-meter peak, the 14th highest mountain in the world, and it's completely within the border of China. So it's it's west of Mount Everest. Cho-Oyu, which he was on in 1996, is the 6th highest mountain in the world, basically right next door, near Makalu, where Lhakpa grew up. And you know, if you want to go climb a mountain and have time alone, if you will, you go to Makalu, or you go to Manaslu, or some of the other 8,000-meter peaks. But none of them have the name Mount Everest. None of them are Mount Everest. I mean, think about how huge that is. It's going to keep bringing people, as you said, like the 1996 disaster, and then Krakauer's book, which was awesome and well-written and introspective, but also critical of the whole commercialization, if you will. I read that book and I thought, boom, man, I can't wait to get there, because I can, I can pull that off, So, so every time you try to tell people don't go away, boom, you're going to have 100 just lining up ready to go. So Nepal, I'm not sure how stringent this has become. Apparently, so they have an age limit now. You have to be 18 years old, I think, to get on a permit, and you can't be one of the people, say, with one leg or one arm to try to climb on a permit. So, and you can't be over a certain age now. It's like 72 or something like that. So they're trying to squeeze it in there a little bit. But those are the people who are uber prepared, usually, the ones who have one leg or one arm or something like that. It's all the other people who just plunk down the money and try to get a cheap, guided service to get them up there.
So the Everest actually has two sides, the north side and the south side in Nepal. Lhakpa, I mean, the south side and the Nepal side, this is the more crowded side where there's a larger number of climbers, and you've been on the north side several times. How would you compare the two? And because the effects of commercialization would have been different on each of these.
Yeah, south side is more little difficult because it's warms. The sun is right away comes the south side, makes it very warms. The north side makes south side are really scared because they melt very quickly. In Khumbu Ice Call, they right away the near 1 hour walking the Everest base camp, and they makes it very hot very quickly. But north side is for me, I need a nice jogger, it's warm, very cold, and never no come avalanche. Also, but very cold, the north, very cold, north side, yes. But south side, very warm, avalanche comes, Khumbu Ice Call, all the times Baroque's fixing doctors, Khumbu Ice Call doctor, they say. It's a little difficult. I'm scared with the south side because it's a very nice road, but little scary because the ice very melt very quick. Yeah. Because it's a south, the sun right away, morning comes right there. Yes. We mostly night times up going, right?
Yeah.
2 o'clock night. Yeah. Because daytime the sun comes, the ice the moving, look like water. We put on the ice like the cracking.
Yeah.
And it was so scary. And sometimes I rest, make it, come here, like the Sherpa. Everybody's scared. Look like so moving so fast. We can. In the ice it makes a noise and like that. Look like, we say, wow, come here. But we're jumping, but we keep going. It's scary.
Yeah.
Yes.
Scary.
So is this combination of the route that you see as the most dangerous on the south side, which is the most crowded, as the combination that makes this seem such a problem?
Yes, south side is more dangerous, very, very dangerous because south, the sun is right away comes. North side is very cold, and keep long reach, and keep walk. But very technical, rock climbing, ice climbing, very cold, 8,000 meter, we said dead zone. Very, no have a food, all night is walking with ice climbing, very difficult, rock climbing, means we fight all night today. A little difficult, yes.
Has Everest become too crowded to be safe, do you think, Heather?
I think on the one hand, yes, given what Tom was just describing. On the other hand, I'm actually, aside from the major catastrophes with the earthquake and with the collapse of the Khumbu icefall, aside from that, I am surprised at actually how safe Mount Everest has become. I thought, years ago, I thought there would be a lot more people dying because of the crowds on Mount Everest. And I think the guides have gotten better. Certain companies and certain guides have really improved their standards. So on the one, it's a mixed bag. I think on the one hand, yes, it's too crowded, and that poses more risk and more danger for people. On the other hand, I think there are some guiding companies that have really improved their standards. One thing for sure, though, is, and this is part of why I left, is that it really wasn't a wilderness experience anymore. There were so many people. When I first went to Everest in 1994, there were 5 expeditions occurring at that time. When I returned to the north side of Mount Everest in 1998, there were 22. And so I could see the writing on the wall, and I just thought, this is not going to add up to anything good as far as overcrowding and safety is concerned.
Yeah, it's very crowded, and whereas as when you're trained and you're in training as a mountaineer and a climber, you look for the hazards that one might expect to encounter in the mountains, an avalanche or rock falling, or making sure that your ropes are done well, and you're tying into your rope right, and you know how to belay somebody, and there's the objective hazards, if you will, all those things that might happen, but you're prepared for those and you understand those, and the more crowded it gets, those objective hazards change, and the whole it's a game changer. So with more people and a lot more people who are making mistakes, I guess is probably the best way to put it, you have to watch out for people now in a much different way. So when I lay awake in the middle of the night and have my fears about climbing, it's not about falling into a crevasse and not being able to get out of a crevasse. It's about the people that I can't really predict. And so on the south side in 2016, for instance, a person fell from the top of the Lhotse face and went all the way down to the bottom of the Lhotse face and narrowly missed people coming up the fixed lines. That's not a rock fall. That's different. That's a human error, and it's tragic. And but suddenly we have to look out for something very different. On the other hand, even though more people summit now, it is technically, I guess, getting easier because now there are ropes that you can follow up to the summit. It's still a really freaking hard mountain to climb, even on a good day. So you might have O's, you might have your oxygen, you might have the good support staff and strong climbers around you, but you gotta like get it together and make that happen on your own right. So it's still a significant accomplishment. 8 times out of my imagination right now. But you know, so I think what's happening is there are better guides, and those guys, remember, you know, I mean, you hear people say, oh, you paid $100,000 to have a guide take you up Mount Everest. Nowadays, I would be willing to bet a nickel that there's not one person who's paid that $100,000 that's died. Now, you go and hire a guiding outfit and you pay $20,000, I could bet you a nickel that there are dozens of people who have died. So you get what you pay for on that mountain. Mm-hmm. You pay a really good guide, a one-on-one guide. I could probably name 20 of them right now. They're not going to let you die. Mm-hmm. Now, those young, inexperienced ones, and that's the unfortunate thing where, like, you know, you got the buying power. And as a cameraman, I get paid. So it's like I'm on the inside. I'm part of it. I'm like just as bad as any badness is, if you will, on the mountain. I'm part of it. I'm earning my living on the mountain. On the other hand, I'm kind of removed from it. I'm watching it happen, kind of like taking the role of Krakauer, reading about Krakauer today, who said, I took that assignment as a reporter and a writer, but I wouldn't have taken it if I didn't want to be there and summit that thing on my own. I wanted it bad, but that was his ticket in. And, you know, heaven knows, look what happened in his life, how amazing it became because he was at the right time at the right place. But, you know, on the north side, what they're doing now is when I went in '99, I thought it was incredible that you could actually drive a truck into base camp, you know, this big 15-ton truck, and load all your gear and dump it onto the glacier and set up your base camp. They're paving a road to base camp. I mean, the whole world has changed. You know, free Tibet, forget it. It's not happening. There are railroad tracks from Beijing right to Lhasa, right to base camp, if you will. And they're going to build a museum in base camp, so day tourists can go pop in and have a look at Everest memorabilia. It's never going back. No. It's just the way it goes. So instead of, I can't criticize that. It just becomes part of, let's be safe and take care of myself, you know. So it is a different world, and it's only been 20 some odd years since I first went there.
Yeah, it's changed.
Since you mentioned the filmmaking, does making a film change the experience, or posting on social media, some of the opportunities that people have now to stay connected to the rest of the world? Has that changed the experience of climbing?
Take it.
Totally, yeah. It has changed it a lot, and I'm going to try not to over-dominate. I really want to listen to the others talk, but kind of an interesting story that puts things into perspective. So in '99, I filmed the Mallory expedition, where I met Heather, who was guiding a trip in there. And so Mallory was discovered, his body was discovered at about 27,000 feet, and it took place on May 1st of '99. And the next morning, we were all down in advanced base camp, which is about 21,000 feet, and we're having breakfast. And a friend of mine walked by our tent, and it was a big secret. Don't anybody tell anybody a word about the discovery. We're going to sneak out of Tibet and bring the news back home to the world. And this friend of mine walks by and he goes, "Hey guys, congratulations." And we're all playing dumb, like, "What are you talking about?" "Well, I just heard a BBC radio report interviewing Sir Edmund Hillary, congratulating you on the discovery of George Mallory." We're like, "Oh my God." So 24 hours later, it's world news. Now, put that into perspective. George Mallory disappears with Sandy Irvin on June 8th, 1924. It took months for the news of his death, their death, to reach home. Months. So granted, 75 years is a long time, but how things have changed. You know, I mean, and it's all part of that. Like, we're caught up in something that we have no control over. So does filmmaking change my experience? 100%. It's the way I bring myself to it. It's my in. So when I joined the '99 expedition, I had, you know, I Gasherbrum too. I'd been at McKinley and Aconcagua and climbed and had some epics and everything. But I was on this team. I thought I was coming out of Massachusetts state championships, thrown right into the Olympics. Conrad Anker, Eric Simonson, Andy Polich, Jake Norton, Tap Richards, studs, like total studs. And I'm just like, ugh. You know, and I'm the high altitude cameraman. You know, and like half of the guys on the high altitude team had already summited before. And I just pretended like, just pretend I know what I'm doing. And, you know, fortunately everything worked out. But yeah, it completely, overwhelmingly impacts my experience to be a cameraman on these trips. I'm the guy everybody has to be around because I'm capturing it, but it's how I see my experience as well.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about, or you've mentioned this before, you don't have control over the narrative either. Yeah. So if a film is being made during an expedition, you don't know really what story is going to get told. So being on an expedition is like being part of a family. I mean, your brother might have a very different experience of the family from your sister. It's a different experience. So the same thing happens on an expedition where we're all hanging out and it's this super intense experience and there are these really deep bonds, but we're all having really different stories emerge from that expedition. And so you see the film and it's kind of running a different narrative, or a narrative that could be counter to your narrative that's happening on the mountain. And again, if you look at the '96 tragedy, how many narratives came out about that? I mean, there was Krakauer's version of that story, but then there was Anatoly Bukriev, I mean, or Neil Beidelman. I mean, there are three very different narratives right there. So what's truth? What's true? Whose narrative is true? And that often happens. There was a film made about our 1994 expedition about Michael Rangberger, who was an Australian climber who died. It was his 7th attempt on the mountain. And there's incredible footage of him sitting on the summit just sobbing. But you know, there was a particular story that got told about his life. And some people agreed with it and some people didn't. So what is truth? And certainly what's the reality of the expedition can be very different than the filming. Wasn't
that film called The Fatal Game?
Yes.
And it was narrated by, that might have been the one that Robert Redford narrated.
That was Robert Redford, yeah.
And that's an interesting story because the cameraman,
Mark Fettu.
Yeah, he was witnessing.
Right.
But when somebody's crawling to the summit as the sun is going down, it's a great shot. But we all know the ending of that film before it ends, and it was just tragic. And it was his 7th attempt in 7 years. The guy had 7 kids in Australia, and just like, I'm going to die if I have to get to the summit. And he fulfilled his dream.
He did. And Mark, who accompanied Michael Reinberger to the summit,
great climber, but
who was a great climber, literally could not turn Michael around from the summit. His obsession was so deep and so profound. Although he tried. But again, I mean, I think Michael may have died a lot sooner on the mountain had Mark turned around on his own. But yeah, the footage is pretty incredible. Yeah.
I think it's called The Fatal Game.
I think that, yeah, there were several titles actually, and I think that was the final title. Yeah.
So, Lhakpa, given that you said your daughters are the experts with the phones, do you try to stay connected with them while you're on the mountain?
Yes.
Or,
Yes.
How do you do that?
I do sometimes right now it's very easy in the Chinese government right away phone there, so we can talk to the phone. Every Sherpa right now is very changing different way. Sherpa is carry phone and talk with the phone near the summit below. Hello, hello. Take the, and I said, what you doing? This Sherpa is no talk is no use. No, my phone is work. You know, hello. They take the gloves. They're talking with the phone, and I said, oh my God, in the connection with the near the summit. It's so difficult. Very easy now is a connection with the phone every way. They have taken service in near the summit like that, you know. come on. And I said, yeah, I want to join. You know, we put them take the oxygen 5 minutes, and we put it back. You know, we have fun, you know. With the Sherpa guys have a suppies, you know. Take the top of the Everest. Okay, we want to set the two side, Makalu and Locha side, you know. We do that, you know. Sometimes I say, so very everywhere phone right now. You know, everywhere internet, you know, everywhere texting, you know, texting with the girlfriend, texting with the boyfriend on top of the Everest, you know. So it's so easy, you know. I say, okay, I want to call my daughters, you know. I do like that. Yes, very easy right now. A long time ago, not easy. 2000, I now have a phone. Also, documents. Like the shoes is very different kind. Now it's very technology, it's very different kind, gloves, different kind goggles, you know. Yeah. Sometimes I say, oh my God, what can I use, you know, this different kind of new things, you know. Yeah. I had to use all models, long terms, humor. You know, now it's different kind of humor. I don't know, I figure out, you know. So different kind is easy. They bring them very nice technologies, things, you know. Yeah.
Should mention that the visual aids Tom brought.
Yeah.
But this is a suit that someone would wear in the ascent.
Yes, exactly. That's a down suit, and you probably wouldn't want to wear that below Camp 2 unless it was bad weather. You might start out in the morning from base camp to go up to Camp 2, which is 21,000 feet, but you'd probably put it on at Camp 2. This is on the south side. On the north side, you wouldn't want to wear it much below 20-some-odd thousand feet. And then with the idea that while you're climbing on a summit day where 30 below might be your temperature, you're generating just enough body heat to kind of keep yourself nice and toasty in there. And then that'll keep you nice and warm.
Yeah, I want to tell you something.
Yeah.
Here, I had 2003 as a tourist. I don't know, British maybe. They has all the dungarees, the poop. You know, so smelling. And the Sherpa talking with the big leader. Hello, Borasab, my tourist did poop in the sword, inside the dungaree. You know, the big boss says, bring down slowly, bring down. You know, yeah, he stuck with the poop, you know. You know, I say, oh my God, we need a diaper. Yeah. We need a diaper.
But you know what? That reminds me. You mentioned how cold it was on the north.
Sherpa is a poop killing in after. Okay, yeah. my tourist is bring 2 hours later makes a hot water. He need the shower. You know. Oh my God! And after he come, he's so smelling in the base camp. Oh. And I said, well, we need the emergency diaper right now. You know.
Yeah.
Really, so difficult in Everest.
But you mentioned how cold it was on the north side. It was on the north side of Everest that I figured out if it was cold enough and the wind was blowing in the right direction that I could pee outside on my down suit and on my gaiter, and then it would freeze and I could just brush it off.
Yes.
Peter, you didn't gamble for that one. Yeah.
But it's actually... excrement is one of the topics on Everest. You know, what do you do with it when it's not trapped in the suit?
Yeah. So, you know, after sometimes tourists say, hey, dawa, I had a pee coming. Okay, take it so difficult. I saw the 8,000 meters, they wanted to try pee. You know, some very difficult take out, you know, Sherpa, take the gloves, you know, try them, put them, everything. You know, we do, you know, not me, but Sherpa guys. I saw my own eye. And then sometimes why people not talking these things, you know? All the hiding because they're shy, maybe. You know? And after they got the summit, and I said, why you did upstairs? And I joke, I'm kidding. Not tell Lhakpa secret. This is the secret. It's okay. You know, of course, secret. You know, you're not children. Now you recognizing here, base camp. We killing nice, you know, smelling good. But you come with a big poop in it. With the summit also, he bring poop too. You know, summit poop.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
And then he saves it because it's been there, so.
It's
Sorry,
been
I just had to pile on here, so.
So the poop is just one of the forms of the trash, the garbage, the oxygen containers that are said to be strewn all over Everest.
Yeah.
How big of a problem is that? I mean, Tom and Lhakpa, you've been there the last few years. I mean, obviously, in the early 90s, it was very different. Fewer people had been there. But what is the state of things now?
Now it's being.
It's probably better now.
Yeah.
And, you know, because it became this thing, if you will, for there to be environmental cleanups of the mountain. One, from people who just had an esoteric desire to keep the mountain, if you will, unfettered. But, you know, also, at least in Nepal, I know China, the Chinese Mountaineering Authority also does this, but in essence, what happens is when an expedition enters the mountain, they have to leave an environmental deposit. And I'm not sure what it is. It's a lot. It's like $5,000 or something. And then based on the number of people who are permitted and their staff, they come up with some, I still think it's arbitrary, but some number, a weight of garbage that expedition should leave the mountain with. And so in order for you to receive your environmental deposit back, you've got to kind of go weigh your garbage. So the idea is that you take your trash out. There are porters whose sole job it is to go take, you know, these blue barrels of excrement out every day, and you'll see them, and they cap it off. I mean, you could throw it off a cliff, and it wouldn't open up, but they literally, there's like a wooden frame made, and it turns into a backpack, and they hike it out. The interesting thing is I have no idea where they go, but they just come off the mountain. But because of these environmental expeditions, there was a time where what an expedition would do is they would say to their staff, they'd say, hey, for every oxygen bottle you bring down, we'll give you $5 or $10. And so for a while, and I suspect that this is a problem anymore because I think people have learned more, what would happen is they'd say, well, for $5 or $10 per oxygen bottle, there was just major poaching going on at 26,000 feet, and so a strong Sherpa can carry a lot of oxygen bottles, and you've got to understand that for 5 or 6 trips up the mountain, you bring 4 or 5 bottles down every time. That adds up to a lot of money. That's a lot of income for a small family. So, but overall, so much garbage is coming off that mountain that what you really see up there are, you know, some memorials, if you will, like at the South Col on the north side. There's a, you know, on the North Col's at 26,000 feet. There's kind of a place where there's a body that will never leave, and it's the body of that person is kind of covered around with rocks, and there's prayer flags and everything. And then on the north side, you know, there are a lot of places where you can encounter bodies that are exposed. It's a colder part of the mountain. There's less snow as well, so you can see them sometimes from far away. So in a way, a lot of the garbage comes off because expeditions have no choice. They want their money back, if you will, that environmental deposit. But in terms of the excrement part of it, by the way, though, there's a lot of people who's, you know, they'll go off trail, and you know, I suppose if you go into a crevasse, it's not that big of a deal because it goes down like 100 feet and it takes 100 years for it to work its way out of the glacier. Just, you know, I mean, I've been on Mount McKinley, and that's what we would do. We'd take bags and throw them into a 100-foot crevasse. Now, this is going back to 1991, 2, 3, and things like that. But you can't do that anymore. You have to carry it out.
Yeah, sometimes we Sherpa talks. We talking all the time funny, joking. And it's a lot of poops, you know, have a drums. And Sherpa says, "What you doing this poop? Yeah, give the government, because government, the tourists pay lot of money, is dollar. Must we give a government?" You know, like that. So like the, but we not give, they take the down, the government say, okay, throw them some way. They has a, yeah, they put them some way, dumps.
Yeah.
But we don't know where.
We don't know
That's
where,
the thing.
There's a valley. There's a
Their
spot.
valley some
Yeah,
way,
it's-
yes.
You don't want to go
Hiding.
there.
Some valley. Yeah.
Some
That's
way.
the film.
There's look
That
like
is
mountains
the film.
maybe.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, there is a
Where
kind of
does it all
cesspool.
go?
Are the high altitude workers, Sherpas or others, who are part of all of these expeditions compensated enough to justify for the risk that they have to take? What do you think, Lhakpa?
yeah, it's a very risky, but they're very tossed people. One time they give the tourists, okay, this is you Purum Summit. This tourist you must Purum Summit. They tell leaders, the guide, big boss, say, okay, you're a tourist this one, you're a tourist this one. It look like babysitting. Sherpa is the babysitting right now, you know. The tourists not coming, you know, have a bonus, you know, about your money, you know, he must, whatever, he must Purum Summit, and you have a bonus and a summit bonus. And Sherpa says, oh my God, Sherpa says, look, my tourist is strong, no strong, you know. Maybe he can go, he checking, look like, you know, strong, no strong. You know, it's, okay, maybe my tourists go, you know, but they, sometimes tourists cannot make it. Near the summit, please come down, you know, please come down. Maybe, you know, they put them to oxygen full level, tourists cannot move, but one Sherpa cannot take it in the top of the Everest. We need the 2, 3 Sherpa that draw the people up in it, you know, but they no pay, but they have one person. A 2, 3 Sherpa, 4 Sherpa, they take it in a zoomer up and put them oxygen for pressure high, full high, and they take it up and down. But one Sherpa, very weak tourist, they stuck with the Sherpa, in the tourist. And the Sherpa said, please, my tourist cannot move, my tourist, and they had a big boss in the base camp. Okay, we stand the oxygen, slowly, bring down.
Yeah.
Yes, bring down more oxygen, put 'em, more oxygen, put 'em. I did. And it is Sherpa stuck with the tourists, and they die. Sometimes they die together. They die together, you know. They never left the tourists living alone. They never.
Yeah.
They stay, please, sir, move, like that.
Yeah.
It's like that. They're very, they make some like the gloves, you know.
Yeah.
They make some warm. They try best and push down. Yes.
Before we open it up to questions from the audience, I have one last question to ask each of you to respond to. Is there something about Everest that you think people don't know that they should know about Everest?
Go ahead.
Well, please, go ahead. Of course you.
Tom, you want to go? I have to think about it a minute.
You know, in today's day and age, you can find out just about everything on the internet, you know, and look it up, read books. For me personally, the one thing that I've come to understand about that mountain is that it's an immense center of energy. It unmistakably exudes these vibrations that, for better or for worse, draws people toward it. It's a massive mountain, and when you see it for the first time, you become transformed. And for some people, that desire to stand on it and be in that environment is overwhelming, and it never goes away. And because of that energy, what draws us toward it, there's a bigger thing happening here. We enter, I don't want to go too tangential here, but we all enter this realm for various reasons, to kind of understand the core of our soul and what it is that we're on this planet for. And for me, when I go to Everest, I look at all the people, the experienced ones, the inexperienced ones, the guides, the Sherpa. We're all drawn there for some reason. Some of us don't really know it while we're there, but some are drawn there to die. Some are drawn there to live. Some are drawn there to tell stories. Some are drawn there to help Sherpa. Some are there to save lives. And that energy center is so powerful, and it's so overwhelming that regardless of the commercialization, for all the good things and all the bad things that it does, it will never end. That is such a gigantic part of this planet. It is just going to, like a magnet, whoosh, it's just going to suck you toward it, and it will never let you go. And so after I summited, when I came back down in 2016, which was very literally and figuratively a high point in my life, and no pun intended, I guess. But when I came back down and I encountered the 3 men who lost their lives only within a couple of hours from me summiting, I crawled into my tent at 26,000 feet, and I was alone in my tent. I didn't even take my crampons off. My feet were sticking out, and I sobbed. And I just thought, I will never, ever, ever come back here again. I'm never coming back. I will never feel joy about summiting. What have I done? Look at who have I become, this person drawn there to make money on this mountain. And I was so convinced that that feeling in that moment was true. But here I am, a year and a half later, already entertaining 2 other film offers and potential to go back this spring and the spring after. There's no getting out. That's all I can say. And so from a personal standpoint, it's deeply personal, and everybody has their own story to tell. So I'm not sure if I can tell you anything about the flora and fauna leading up to the death zone, but I'll tell you something from deep within, really, once you get hit by it, there's no getting out.
And I think I would end related to what Tom was just saying, is that the real Everest is on the inside. It's not on the outside. The mountain you climb is the inner one. It's not the outer one.
Right on, yeah.
Mountain Everest is a different looks every year. They look dynamics different every year because the wind shifts. Every year, which way part is wind. South way comes, they look different face. You know, Mountain Everest is changing every year in different looks, yes. But I believe every year I see Mountain Everest different angle, you know. Sometimes they see the people look like people face. Sometimes different hanging like that in top of the almost we hear, but wind shoveled this way, almost working. You know, sometimes we say, Sherpa say, oh my God, look like Mountain Everest, look like a house right now. We cannot stay too much because they sometimes can't work. It look like that, you know. We hit the summit here and the wind below this way, the wind, they cut. Yeah. Yes, sometimes Mountain Everest is beautiful. We hike around upstairs, gives. Sometimes Mountain Everest lose weight. I saw the 2 Russian men. One Russian man is big, 200 pounds. He's coming. And wow, you climbing Everest? I said, yes, you know, I climbing Everest, Lhakpa. And after he up and down, he's walking really. After he cannot fit his fan and come down, he's so skinny. And I said, wow, my God, you lost weight. And yes, I lost almost many pounds. Oh my God, yes, now I need yak bell. You know, they put him the big Tibetan bring the bell. He cannot because his pen is too loose. He put them Tibetan bell in a big terms. Look like I have a Tibetan bell right now. Because Mountain Everest lose weight too. It's, because here, people go here, you know, exercise too hard, but right away the food is there, you know. Grab them. The Everest not so much food there, you know. Very limited food, yeah. Very limited food, you know, we have also because the food is a foraging. We must be careful a little bit in order to cook have it. But here, I do exercise. Oh, have got up the right away fridge, you know, go, so many budget, you know, their food, you know, right away. You know, people, you know, sometimes I work in Whole Food, you know. In Whole Food, so many people comes, you know. So, you know, I want to lose weight, Lhakpa, look like you. You know, please come with me, Everest. You know, no food. You know, no food. We lost right away. You know, no need to pay too much money here. Here is $10,000. You know, $10,000 right away. 2 weeks we pay $10,000. We not lose weight. You know, we gain weight. But Everest, you come, you lose weight like that. I say.
Thank you. I think there's now an opportunity for people from the audience to ask questions. If you have a question, why don't you raise your hand, and I think there's some people who have microphones that will be able to bring them to you. And we've got a little less than half an hour for this opportunity for questions. Is there someone, there's one here and up there.
Lhakpa, when you go up to Everest next, will you go as a Sherpa?
No, I not go Sherpa because I go myself Sherpa. Yes, sometimes I guide in people upstairs. Yes, and I hire some other Sherpa too. You know, the men Sherpa. Yes, of course, men has more power. You know, we are women. I am a woman, a little silly. You know, go up to 8,000 meters, and I need other Sherpa, help to my other tourists, yes. Whatever, go with me, and I guide extra 2-3 Sherpa, yes.
Next question.
Hello. I was curious if you, when you have been on the mountain as a Sherpa, if you feel like people really give respect who are going on the mountain, the hikers, if they're very respectful to the Sherpas from what you've seen and appreciative of the work that they've done. And I'm also curious specifically for Lhakpa, what your experience has been as a female Sherpa and amongst the other mostly male members, if there's been a lot of respect given to you or it's something that's been really hard to make your way.
No, they're very, very respect in women. They help each other. We are look like teams work. We work in teams. You know, they're very nice in the men, in the mountains, in the women is very nice. They have a very respect the men's camps, and they know the mountain life, and they know the hikings, and they know the rescue. They are very nice, kind men, so respect people. Yes, I saw the very nice men comes.
Hi. One of the things that struck me when I was in Nepal was how much the whole industry, like how much the mountaineering and trekking is like the economy. It's like an entire, like almost the entire economy is related to trekking and hiking. And when I hear about critiques of the commercialization of mountaineering and the Himalayas in general, one of the things I think about is like what would happen to the economy if you restricted it at all. And I'm just wondering if you guys have any insight on like the conversations that go on from the perspective of like of Nepal or China or like the countries like and the communities that are most impacted, because like I don't know what would happen if we went any other way for their economies. Thank you.
I can just say briefly, they want to spread it out. If it's all focused just on the Everest region and just on a particular valley, they would like it you to go to the Annapurna region, to the Langtong, to other valleys. I mean, but you were absolutely right. I mean,
yeah, they had many. Yeah, they had a different kind of mountains. You know, they have Annapurna, Kanchenjunga, Makalu, Dholagiri expedition. Many kind of different Everest. You know, they gives. But we scared. You know, the government is scared in Nepal. Oh my God, have an earthquake. Now tourists not coming. Oh my God, tourists are coming more and more. You know, tourists never know stop because it's the Himalayas, beautiful natures. Right away see them, you know, right there. And people likes comes. Yeah. And people likes outdoor things. People likes the nature, you know. So it's beautiful mountain rounds, you know, different people, different culture. But we respect in people, you know, also. Yes.
My question is, you mentioned that there's been cases of a Sherpa dying with a tourist because the tourist did not want to turn back. I'm assuming that before the expedition starts, the tourists are educated that you need to listen to your Sherpa. So is that more of a function of a cognitive decline with hypoxia, or why does that still happen, and if so, why is that allowed to happen? I believe the word is it Sardar, is the lead Sherpa, or Sardar or something, you know. What's the mechanism to make sure that can't happen?
Yeah, sometimes, you know, tourists come in, Sardar, the big litters, Sardar have a big litters, they tell to calm down, and they send the other Sherpa in a rescue down. Yeah. Carry other Sherpa, 2-3 Sherpa, and bring the tourists in down safely and send home in the family. Of course, they try them best way. Yes. The rescue look like emergency rescue, 20 Sherpa send up in the mountain and bring the down. Very difficult, 8,000 meters, one person bring down. Very difficult, we need maybe 6-7 Sherpa, and they can bring very easily down. Yes. Sometimes the tourists in the top of the 8,000 meters, they lose the mind, look like dorongs. I feel high in upstairs, you know. And after we so much high altitudes, they give a pressure, our brain is a little bit, everybody going cuckoo there, really so. And after we come down, they say, upstairs, I don't know, my wife, sir, you know your wife number. They want to try to call satellite phone, you know, wife can say something, you know, come down. You know, tourist, I don't know my wife number, I forget. You know, because really forget because high altitude. And me too, I come back down, best game, I really forget many kind of things. And 2-3 months later, I recover myself better, yes. I have like that in my mind.
So does that occur a lot less now where tourists might die because of that?
No, tourists not really not die right now, so not too much. Only they died at the avalanche, maybe they fell, and they really not die. They maybe accident, they fell right away from Sherpa, maybe like that.
Well, and you know, I mean, there's like a certain kind of element of lawlessness up there in a way. You know, you go above high camp, and there's experienced and well-established guiding agencies that kind of vet their clients out a little bit better, and there's an understanding this is the way it's going to go. And then there are some guiding agencies that will take anybody who puts the money down, and those are the ones that are dangerous, and those are the ones that get people kind of peripherally involved and create a greater level of danger up there. And you know, I mean, you do lose your mind up there. You know, when people are hypoxic or becoming hypothermic, you know, they start ripping their gloves off, and people will, you know, above 8,000 meters into the death zone, people will, like if you tried to touch that person and they were and you thought that you were going to help them, they might become violent and try to swing an ice axe at you. So there are stories of, you know, people literally wrapping a rope around to constrain people, or to have one person on each side so the person can't run in any direction. I mean, it's very surreal would be kind of a really soft way to put it. It's like lawlessness, I guess, is the only way to put it. And that's why you want to stay near the really well-established guiding services and stay away from the other ones. Yeah. A lot of hands. There's a guy right here. Yeah.
Hi. Thank you very much for your time. A couple things. Number one is that the selection process of a client, the workouts that need to be done to maintain, the skills or the stamina to compete, and how you guys can actually tell who can climb and who couldn't climb. And then the thing that's scary is the pulmonary edema or the cerebral edema. Is that hereditary, or does that come on? Can you tell ahead of time? Is there training? I know there's a lot of questions, but just the workout is just something I don't know. You don't really know what's going to happen at altitude until you get there. And there is some hereditary aspects to it. You know, some people go to altitude and they can't function, and then other people, by the luck of the draw, you perform really well at altitude. And training is, it's kind of an interesting thing. Like I guess I always train, but I don't do anything different before I go on a trip. A lot of it is like you get into better shape as you kind of trek into base camp and things. But unfortunately, you can't really tell. Some of the slowest hikers I have ever been with in my life, absolutely maddening, like slow, are like, boom, they just nail the summit. I mean, it's slow, but but boom, there's no problem. Excuse me. There's no problem whatsoever. And then there's some really fast guys who just like hit 8,000 meters, and they're just done. So there's just no way to know. It's kind of the luck of the draw.
You do a lot of cardio, though?
Yeah.
I guess what kind of training would you recommend for someone? Yeah.
I used to tell people, if you're not vomiting in your gym, you're not doing it right.
Oh. Yeah, there you go. Right. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of running and lifting, and you want to gain weight, so you get to eat a lot. And,
I was the first person who gained weight on Mount Everest. True story.
Okay, yeah.
I was just curious, what is, in your mind, the biggest downside to the commercialization? I used to think it was the trash, compiling on the mountain, but if that's not really the one, and is it mostly safety, or are there other ecological or environmental, if you had to pick one thing?
I can answer real short, quick answer for me is it's brought a lot of economic prosperity to the region, Everest in particular. By far, the downside is that there are more people, low-wage cooks, porters, being put into extremely dangerous situations, who are losing their lives. And then when they die, there's no insurance. Their families are left without any means to have an income. So to me, it's really on a personal level. Garbage or over too much construction. We can fix that. You know what I mean? But it's the loss of life, and then families losing those people who brought income in. That's in my opinion. Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Hi, this question's for you, Tom.
Yeah.
So to me, like, the commercialization of such a place like Mount Everest in the climbing world, it sort of clashes with true exploration. I know nowadays, like, a lot of the younger climbers, like guys like, well, Conrad Anchor isn't so young anymore, but the pros that follow Conrad, such as like Jimmy Chin or David Lama, they seem to be shying away from Everest just because it's so commercialized. The commercialization, does that really take away from the prestige of climbing such a mountain? And like, what's your take on like guys that are looking to other, not as famed peaks in that area, such as like Lunagrig or Annapurna? What's your thought on that as a person that's climbed Everest, and for you, Heather, as well?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. It's kind of two sides of the coin. Sometimes as I'm trekking in, I'm thinking, what am I doing here? I mean, I thrive on, when I go for a run, I don't run roads anymore. I just run trails, and I consider it like my main goal on a run is to see no other human being. I mean, I live down this 100-yard long dirt driveway, and you don't even hear cars there. You know, I hear there's more bear and deer and things like that. So I get that. I totally.
Yeah, because like in a way, like Everest, to me, like I've never been to the Himalayas, but it's almost like it's becoming like a nightmare almost in that regard of commercialization, because like it takes so much to get to a place like Everest, and then when you finally get there, you hear of all the downsides, like all these people and climbers that are unexperienced, that maybe some people might think they don't belong there because they didn't put in the time before they went to Everest. They just threw down the money, and now they're there because it's all about just summiting this mountain that's just become a commercial.
Yeah, there's certainly a very repulsive side to it, but that's a judgment right there by me saying that, because I mean, I go there because I'm making an income, and no doubt Everest is, there's only one, right? That's the only place to go to get to the highest point in the world.
Right.
But I live up in the Mount Washington Valley up in New Hampshire, and there's some climbers, extremely talented climbers, well-known North Face athletes, and who would never go to Mount Everest. And it doesn't mean that they don't look at me and go, "What's wrong with you? You go to Mount Everest. That's awful." But a good friend of mine is a guy by the name of Mark Sinnott. He's a North Face athlete, and he's writing a book right now for National Geographic. And you'll keep your eye out for a book by Mark Sinnott. You'll know who he's writing about, but when it comes out. But he said to me, he goes, "Pollard, I do these amazing things." Like he put up new routes in like on the Trango Tower with Alex Lowe, and did insane things that have never been done and might never even be repeated. And so he's down at National Geographic about 2 months ago, and he's writing the book, and he's like, "I want to go on world tour doing my talk." And they're like, you do one of the best talks we have ever seen, but dude, I'm sorry, man. Like, you just need to get Everest down there, because that's what brings the people to fill the seats, And he's like, "Oh my God." So Sinnott is still 10 years younger than me. So maybe in 15 years he'll go and tag it and have Everest in there. But it's like the last thing you want to do is go and just mix yourself up with all this. It's not pretty.
Do you think there'll be a shift of climbers like looking to do more of these unknown peaks over the years?
Yeah, it's happening, I think.
We
just don't see it,
Yeah, and there was a shift. I mean, so Reinhold Messner, Wojtek Krtika, Wanda Rukowitz, I mean, they ushered in the age of alpinism. I mean, fast and light, not the big siege commercial style of approaching Everest. So I almost think there's a history here of light and fast. I mean, I think there's a future to it also. But you can specialize. Are you an alpinist? Or are you someone who considers yourself a mountaineer? I mean, you can specialize. You can choose your niche.
Yeah, and that said, though, so you could go. So you see where the Tibet-Nepal line is. I mean, that red line there. There's stuff up there that's really, really hard to do. Like to repeat the West Ridge of Everest is now it's almost impossible, and it sees very few additional ascents. So in 1963, Tom Hornbein and Willie Unsold went up and put up that route with the Americans, and it's seen, I think, only 2 or 3 repeats. And if you go and try to do that, you're off in your own world on Everest. And then you look on the kind of in the northern, like kind of going to 2 o'clock up there, we're looking into this dark area called the Kangshung Face, which is this vast unknown, and you'd be a complete madman to even enter about 90% of that area. But there are some there are some things that still have yet to be done that are just waiting for somebody to go tag it and do it. But usually the guys or the men and women who should do it like the fast and light, and it costs a lot of money. You need months to do that, so they'll go after a peak that's like 22,000 feet that's unclimbed or something like that.
Sort of the last question.
Yeah, great question, though, but thank you. Sure, yeah. Who gets the microphone?
You mentioned, how information's at the fingertips with internet searches and whatnot. What are some of the bigger outfits out there that are pretty reliable, if cost weren't an issue, to get to the summit, potentially get to the summit? I mean, obviously they don't guarantee getting to the summit, but what are some of the bigger outfits out there that any of you are aware of that have been pretty trusted, through the years?
Boy, if I forget one, and somebody here.
You go, Tom.
Yeah.
Well, there's.
IMG.
I'm thinking about the ones based in the United States. There's IMG. There's Rainier Mountaineering, RMI, Alpine Ascents International. What's the fast light ones? The guys who acclimatize in
Garrett Madison.
Garrett Madison, yeah, Madison Mountaineering. And then there's one out of Seattle. Gosh, and if you are interested, there. What is the name of the company? What they do is they acclimatize in tents, if you will, in your house. So you sleep at like 15,000 feet for a month or so. So they do these uber fast ascents. So you go to Nepal and you get to base camp and you just, boom, you go right for the summit. And it's like, instead of taking 6 or 8 weeks, it takes you like 3 or 4. And it legit works. And these guys are super, qualified. I'll think of it, what the name of it is. If you're truly interested, I'll look it up on my phone later. And
I will add just that some of those outfits actually will take trekkers with their climbers.
Yeah,
and so if you want to spend a night in base camp, you go with one of those outfits that has a permit to climb the peak. Otherwise, you're not. You're staying down the valley, and you kind of go up and spend half an hour in base camp and come back down. So I did that a few years ago and recommend it. But Mike, you have a final duty for us.
Well, first of all, thank you very, very much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
And I want everybody to know that it's very customary to have gifts for the panelists and the moderator. There were gifts for the panelists and the moderator. They each got large-size posters of Mount Washington, Brad Washburn photos of Mount Washington, signed by Barbara Washburn, who you might not all know was the first woman to climb Mount Denali, McKinley. I always never know which way politically I should go in that, so I say them both. Denali, good. That would be my choice too. Old school, new school, and correct, not correct. So thank you again and I hope you enjoy those. There's a specific though thing here I want to just do out loud, which is that 2 of our guests here are going to be doing Everest this coming, May? Spring. Coming up fast, huh?
Might be May, might be the following May.
Okay,
so we're just trying to put the
somewhere
pieces
in the and that's Thom and Lhakpa, and each have agreed. I hope. Wait a minute. Did they know? Do they know about this? They do. Okay.
Do they know?
Because I mean, otherwise it'd be really sore at me. Each has agreed to carry up a Museum of Science.
Nice. Why don't you come over and
flag? I guess these are flags, banners, flags. Wait a minute. Wait, I'll bring them over.
Yes.
Nope. We don't want to wear you out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And Tom's going in Nepal side, right?
Well,
yeah. I'm going Tibet side, the north side. Now we are a competition together. Who was the fastest? And this me. I am.
She
yeah,
wins.
yeah, I can't put them like that.
Thank you, Mike. Yeah.
So we're hoping they can fly those flags when they're up there, but we also know that we don't want either one of them to lose their lives by trying to pull that thing out of their suit. So, and I don't know how you get anything out of that suit. So be careful and be safe, please.
Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah.
I also want everyone to know that to tie it back to our July 8th event here, the museum is putting on Mount Washington, the single climb or double climb, whatever you want. Please look into it. Think about doing it. It really is a lot of fun. You make new friends, or if you don't want to, you don't have to make new friends. It'll be fun anyhow. Different kinds of people like to hike. But all four panelists intend to join us this July 8th. So you'll have a... So then you can ask them the questions you didn't really want to ask out loud. Well, although I think we already touched on some of those. And so again, if you want more information about the July 8th event, fill out your postcard or go online. And thank you, everybody, and good night.
Thank you. Thank you.